Here we are. I'm Michael Pearl at the door answering your questions. Jason asked this question. This is in response to something I taught a while back. He said, wouldn't the vision of Ezekiel chapter 1 and 10 be more symbolic visions that are like allegory? So he has trouble apparently with accepting the concept that the living creatures that Ezekiel sees in chapter 1 through chapter 10 are real creatures. I mean, after all, here's a man-sized body with 6 wings, with eyes inside the wings, with head like an ox, head like an eagle, head like a lion, head like a man. Coals of fire coming out from underneath them, carrying a big platform around with Jesus riding on it. So that sounds kind of fanciful to me. Well, if that were the only place you could find it in the Bible, you'd have a better argument. But you look up the word cherub in the Bible, you find it 30 times, not just in Ezekiel. You find cherubims, which is a plural of cherub, 65 times, which is a total of 95 times that it appears in the Bible. So you're going to have to say this is a little allegory strung out through the whole Bible, beginning in Genesis and going all the way through to Revelation. Now, Ezekiel established clearly from chapter 1 to chapter 10, we gave you that already, that living creatures there in Ezekiel were cherubim. And so that's an additional group above this 95 where living creatures are spoken of. And then when you get to the book of Revelation, you find the exact same characters, same description, called beast. And so there's another long list. So if you took cherubim, living creatures, and beast, and put them all together, you got more like 150 references to them from beginning to end. Now, Ezekiel chapter 1 verse 20 said, this is the living creature that I saw under the God of Israel by the river of Chebar, and I knew that they were the cherubims. So Ezekiel sees the God on the throne. Was that also allegorical? Was that also just a figure of speech? Hebrews 9:5, and over it the cherubims of glory, he's talking about the temple, shadowing the mercy seat, of which we cannot now speak particularly. So he's talking about the temple and comparing it to the reality that's in heaven. So he said that temple that was here on earth had these cherubim overshadowing the mercy seat. And he said, I can't talk about that right now. But then he says in 8:5, who serve under the example and shadow of heavenly things. So go back and read Ezekiel 45 through 50 and read the book of Exodus and see how God told them to build the temple. You find him telling them, carve some cherubim, put them here. Carve some cherubim, put them there. Put one over the mercy seat here and one over the mercy seat there. And so he had them adorn the temple with cherubims, and he said, do it exactly like I tell you to. And he says here that the reason he did that, he admonished them when he was about to make the tabernacle, for see, saith he, that thou shalt make things according to the pattern showed thee in the mount. So an exact pattern that I showed you. Why? It was therefore necessary that the patterns of the things in the heavens should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. So what you have is the earthly temple was a pattern of heaven. And everything about it had to be done exactly, the placement of the cherub and the way they looked, because it was a representation of heavenly realities. So that in itself answers the question, isn't it allegorical? Only if heaven and God are allegorical. Only if the Bible is a useless book. All right, Exodus 25:19, and make one cherub on the one end, and the other cherub on the other end. Even in the mercy seat shall ye make the cherubims on the two ends thereof, and the cherubims shall stretch forth their wings on high, covering the mercy seat with their wings, and their faces shall look one to another. Toward the mercy seat shall the faces of the cherubims be. That's just a sample of how God told them exactly to make everything. And then finally, Ezekiel chapter 28, verse 14, God says this about Lucifer: thou art the anointed cherub that covereth. So God clearly calls Lucifer an anointed cherub who covered the throne of God. And I've set thee so upon the holy mountain of God. So there is a tendency to allegorize, spiritualize the Bible. Why? Because people don't want to believe it. They'll watch a Star Wars movies with some kind of goggle-eyed thing with eyeballs on springs and think that's just wonderful. But when the Bible goes and describes real things, oh, well, you know, I don't believe. Hey, you imagine what aliens might look like? This is aliens, the real thing. And they're actually coming here in spaceships. Get my message on that and look at it. These guys are flying around, all right? Talk about Ezekiel 1 through 10. We talked about that. What's the name of that? You got any idea? You'll put that on the bottom where they can see when we get to that, all right? All right. So that's all for that question.